Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. You don't make an avoidant see your value by proving it. You make them see it by living it. Avoidantly attached individuals are drawn not to those who chase them, explain themselves, or beg to be understood, but to those who refuse to lose themselves in the pursuit of being chosen. They are deeply sensitive to emotional energy, even if they pretend not to be. The more someone tries to convince them of their worth, the less they see it. The moment you start explaining why you matter, they've already tuned out. But when you embody quiet self-respect, when your calm replaces chasing and your peace replaces pleading, that's when something in them shifts. Avoidants crave safety above all else. But what they don't realize is that true safety comes from someone who doesn't threaten their autonomy, yet also doesn't collapse when they pull away. To someone with an avoidant attachment, your emotional independence is magnetic. Not your words, not your devotion, but your stability. It's the way you stay kind, but not available to inconsistency. It's how you set boundaries without punishment. It's how you can love someone without needing to control their love in return. If you want an avoidant to see your value, stop trying to be the exception to their walls. Become the mirror that shows them what healthy love actually looks like. Grounded, patient, unbothered by distance, but unwilling to tolerate disrespect. They might not admit it, but that quiet strength touches something in them that's rarely reached, the part that wants to feel safe enough to come closer. Your value isn't in what you do for them. It's in what you don't do, the moments you don't beg, the space you don't fill, the peace you don't sacrifice. In a world where everyone else chases, the person who doesn't becomes unforgettable. If you want to better understand how to deal with avoidance, then subscribe to the channel to know everything. There's a reason emotional detachment feels so powerful around an avoidant. It mirrors the very control they use to protect themselves. But here's the subtle difference. Their detachment is rooted in fear, while yours must come from self-worth. Avoidants live by a simple emotional rule: distance equals safety. They've built their entire relational blueprint on managing closeness to avoid being consumed. When you chase them, explain yourself, or try to prove your value, you unknowingly confirm their fear that intimacy means pressure. They interpret your intensity not as love, but as potential danger to their independence. And so, they pull away even harder. But when you stop playing that role, when you don't pursue, when you don't react to their silence, when you allow space instead of trying to close it, they feel something new: respect. They don't consciously name it at first. It feels foreign, even disarming. Your calm doesn't register as indifference, it registers as safety. Because you're not trying to take anything from them. You're not trying to control the outcome. You're just being. In that stillness, you break the emotional rhythm they're used to. No tug of war, no drama, no punishment. You become unpredictable not because you're playing games, but because you refuse to operate from fear. And that unpredictability commands attention. Avoidants are fascinated by what they can't control. When you stop being emotionally reactive, they start to notice you in a way they never did before. The most attractive energy to an avoidant is emotional sovereignty. Not coldness, not games. Sovereignty, the quiet confidence that says, I don't chase love. I choose it when it's healthy. That's what penetrates their emotional armor, because it represents everything they lack but secretly desire. Connection that doesn't demand surrender. Your detachment, when rooted in self-respect, doesn't push them away, it pulls them toward you. Not because you're withholding, but because you've become something rare, someone they can't control, but also can't forget. Most people panic when an avoidant goes quiet. They fill the silence with explanations, overreaching messages, or emotional appeals. But what they don't realize is that silence, intentional, grounded silence, is often the only thing that can reach an avoidant heart. Avoidants associate intensity with loss of safety. The more you speak, the more you explain, the more you try to bridge the distance, the more their defenses rise. It's not because they don't care, it's because they're wired to equate closeness with danger. They fear being consumed, controlled, or emotionally exposed. Every word you use to prove your value sounds, to them, like a plea for connection they aren't ready for. But when you don't chase, when you let the silence stand, without hostility, without resentment, it disorients them. They expect pursuit. They expect you to fight for them, to fill the space they've created. And when you don't, when you remain steady and centered, they begin to feel the absence of your energy, not as punishment, but as truth. For the first time, they feel what your presence actually brought into their life. Silence, when done from a place of strength, becomes a mirror. It reflects their own avoidance back to them. They begin to wonder, why aren't they chasing me? Why aren't they angry? That confusion turns into curiosity, and curiosity turns into attention. You've shifted the dynamic without saying a word. This is how emotional value communicates itself, not through noise, but through composure. You don't have to tell an avoidant your worth. You show it by refusing to overextend when they withdraw. Your calm is not a game, it's your boundary. Your absence speaks what words never could, that your love is available, but never at the cost of your dignity. And in that quiet distance, they start to feel something they never expected, the loss of safety in losing you. That's when they begin to see your value, not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. It happens quietly, not with a dramatic revelation or an emotional confrontation, but in a single, ordinary moment when they notice something they can't ignore. You're not like the others. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, predictability is safety. They know how most people will respond to their distance. The moment they pull away, others chase. When they go cold, others try to warm them. It's a loop they've mastered, a familiar rhythm that keeps them in control. But then they meet you, and when you don't play along, their entire emotional pattern begins to fracture. At first, they interpret your calm as disinterest. They tell themselves, she doesn't care enough. But then, something subtle happens. They realize you do care. You're just not trying to control them. That's the paradox that captures them. You're emotionally available without being emotionally dependent. You can love them deeply, yet walk away with grace. You don't compete for their affection, you invite them into peace. That quiet self-assurance feels foreign, even unsettling. For the avoidant, love has always come with strings, expectations, pressure, emotional demands. But you offer something else, choice, the freedom to come close without fear of losing themselves. And that's when their internal narrative begins to crack. Your presence challenges their story, the one that says intimacy always equals loss. Because with you, they start to feel safe enough to imagine connection differently. It's not suffocation, it's calm. It's not dependency, it's balance. You don't need their validation, yet you remain kind. You don't withdraw to punish, you step back to protect your peace. That's what makes them pause. For the first time, they feel the unfamiliar pull of genuine respect. Not admiration for your beauty or charm, but for your emotional steadiness. You represent something they can't easily define, safety without submission, love without control. And when they finally notice the difference, it's already too late. You've become the quiet standard by which they start comparing everyone else. Avoidants aren't attracted to need, they're drawn to balance. It's the paradox that defines their emotional world. They want closeness, but fear it. They crave connection, but resist dependency. So when they encounter someone who embodies both availability and self-sufficiency, their mind short-circuits. You represent the one thing they've never been able to find, safety and connection. Most people misunderstand what independence means in love. They mistake it for emotional coldness or withdrawal. But true independence isn't detachment, it's wholeness. It's knowing who you are without needing to dissolve into someone else. When you carry that energy, the avoidant feels something unfamiliar, admiration. You don't demand from them. You don't chase after reassurance. You radiate a kind of calm that says, I'm fine with or without you. And that unnerves them in the best possible way. They start thinking about you not because you're withholding, but because you're consistent. You don't oscillate between extremes. You don't guilt them for distance, nor reward them for inconsistency. You simply hold your ground. In a world of emotional turbulence, your steadiness becomes magnetic. Avoidants have spent their lives surrounded by two types of people: those who demand too much and those who disappear too easily. But you don't fit either category. You remain a constant. Your value isn't loud, but it's undeniable. You model emotional balance, not as performance, but as a lifestyle. You show that intimacy can coexist with freedom. This paradox awakens something deep in them. They begin to associate you not with pressure, but with peace. You've rewritten the emotional language they thought they understood. And that's when attraction transforms into respect. They may still retreat at times. It's their nature, but every time they do, they notice what they're walking away from: a connection that didn't demand, but invited. And the moment an avoidant realizes that your love doesn't threaten their independence, they start to crave it. Because it's the one kind of love they never learned to trust, but secretly always wanted. Avoidants often believe they can disconnect without consequence. They tell themselves that detachment is control, that distance will reset their sense of safety. But when they meet someone whose energy lingers even in silence, they begin to realize something new. Distance no longer feels like freedom. It feels like loss. At first, they retreat out of habit. That's what they've always done: disappear, recalibrate, convince themselves they don't need anyone. But this time, something is different. They can't stop thinking about you. Your calm response to their withdrawal unsettles them. You didn't chase. You didn't demand closure. You simply allowed space, and that space became a mirror. Avoidants are used to people filling the void with noise. The pleading texts, the emotional explanations, the longing disguised as logic. But you didn't do that. You stayed still, grounded in your self-worth. And in that stillness, they felt something they weren't expecting: your absence carrying more emotional weight than anyone else's presence. This is where the dynamic starts to shift. The avoidant begins to replay moments: your tone, your boundaries, the way you didn't lose yourself trying to hold them. That memory becomes an echo in their solitude. They feel safe thinking of you because you never intruded. You allowed them to breathe without vanishing completely. That's the paradox that captivates them. You gave them freedom, but also left an imprint of peace. The irony is that the more they pull away, the more they feel you. Not as guilt, but as gravity. You've become the emotional reference point they can't escape. Because you didn't try to prove your value, they experienced it. They saw it in your restraint, your balance, your unwavering self-respect. And as they sit with that realization, their usual defenses, sarcasm, distance, distraction, start to lose power. For the first time, they're not running from you. They're running toward understanding why your presence feels so different. That's when it begins to dawn on them. They didn't just lose a person. They lost a sense of peace they can't replicate anywhere else. Every avoidant eventually reaches a breaking point. Not because someone pushed them too hard, but because someone held their ground too calmly. That's the moment when your steadiness stops feeling like comfort and starts feeling like confrontation. Without saying a word, your peace exposes their fear. Avoidants spend years constructing emotional walls to keep pain out. Those walls also keep love out, but they don't see that right away. When you meet them with softness and boundaries instead of anxiety and control, those walls stop working the way they used to. Your stability becomes a mirror. It reflects back what they're avoiding: their own longing, their own loneliness, their own belief that they're unlovable if fully seen. They begin to notice how much effort it takes to stay disconnected. Your calm presence makes avoidance look exhausting. And in their quiet moments, they start asking themselves, why does their peace unsettle me so much? Why do I feel exposed when they're not even trying to reach me? That's the mirror effect in motion. Your emotional clarity shows them what they've buried under years of detachment. You see, Your value doesn't just come from confidence, it comes from awareness. You understand that their withdrawal isn't rejection, it's self-protection. And by not taking it personally, you remove the emotional battlefield they depend on to stay distant. You don't fight for closeness, you let it happen, or not. That lack of emotional struggle confuses them at first. Then it starts to disarm them. For the first time, they're face to face with their own contradiction, wanting love, but fearing what it asks of them. You don't shame them for it, and you don't rescue them from it. You simply stay grounded, making their avoidance visible without judgment. That's how transformation begins. Not through persuasion, but reflection. You become the quiet lesson they never asked for. The proof that love doesn't have to mean loss of control. And when they finally start to see that, they also start to see you. Avoidants don't miss people right away. They miss the feeling someone gave them. And often, that realization comes too late. When you were present, your calm energy didn't demand attention. It simply existed. But once you were gone, that same calm became a silence they couldn't escape. It's then, in the emptiness they once craved, that they start to feel your value not as memory, but as stability lost. For the avoidant, safety has always meant control over emotions, over distance, over how much of themselves they reveal. But you changed what safety meant. You offered emotional consistency without suffocation, interest without urgency, love without dependency. It wasn't something they consciously understood at the time. It just felt easy. And that ease was disarming. They didn't realize that what they were feeling wasn't boredom. It was peace. When you step away, that peace becomes their measuring stick. Other interactions start to feel loud, unpredictable, exhausting. They may try to distract themselves, date other people, return to old patterns, but nothing feels grounded. They compare everyone to you, not because you were perfect, but because you were safe without controlling. You represented what their nervous system had never experienced before, connection that didn't cost freedom. Now they begin to miss not just your presence, but the emotional climate you brought with you, the sound of your patience, the way you didn't collapse under silence, the quiet respect in how you handled distance. You didn't just occupy space in their life, you shifted the emotional tone of it. And that tone stays long after you've gone. Here's the irony. What they once mistook for emotional detachment was actually emotional maturity. What they once thought was indifference was self-respect. Now, in your absence, they finally understand the difference. And this is the moment when missing you becomes more than nostalgia, it becomes clarity. They realize that what they pushed away wasn't threat, it was safety they didn't know how to keep. There comes a quiet moment when the avoidant stops running, not because they've conquered their fear, but because they're tired of living inside it. It's in that moment of exhaustion that they begin to see you clearly, maybe for the first time. Your worth doesn't reveal itself in absence the way attraction does. It reveals itself in contrast. Every shallow connection they pursue after you feels hollow. Every emotionally safe person they meet feels transactional. But thinking of you stirs something deeper, not chaos, not excitement, but calm. And that calm, they now understand, was love all along. Avoidants are wired to equate emotional intensity with danger, but your energy rewired something in them. You didn't mirror their distance, you modeled balance. You didn't react to their silence, you respected it. You didn't demand emotional access, you offered emotional safety. And when they look back, they see how rare that was. How much trust it actually takes to love someone without trying to control them. This is when the awakening begins. They start to realize that their old patterns weren't power, they were protection. That detachment wasn't strength, it was fear disguised as control. And your presence, your patience, exposed that truth gently but unmistakably. You became their emotional mirror, the proof that love doesn't have to be earned through suffering. They remember how your boundaries didn't punish, how your quiet didn't reject, how your distance didn't threaten. Every interaction now stands as evidence that you valued both them and yourself equally. and that balance becomes unforgettable. The avoidant might not reach out right away. They rarely know how to bridge the gap once it's been created. But inside, they've already changed. Their internal script, once rigid with self-protection, has been rewritten with a single realization. They lost someone who loved them the way they always wished love could feel. And whether they ever say it or not, they now see your worth. Not because you convinced them, but because time and contrast did what chasing never could. Here's the truth about avoidance. They don't forget the ones who love them without losing themselves. Everyone else fades into the blur of emotional games and unmet needs. But the person who stayed calm in the storm leaves a mark that time can't erase. You didn't beg, you didn't fight for attention, and you didn't punish them with silence. You simply embodied what they didn't know they were looking for, emotional freedom wrapped in quiet care. Eventually, every avoidant realizes that control was never peace. That emotional distance, once their greatest defense, became their biggest emptiness. They replay the moments when you could have chased, but didn't. When you could have over-explained, but stayed silent. When you could have begged for love, but chose self-respect instead. Those moments stay with them, not because they make them guilty, but because they make them curious. Who were you, really, that you could love without fear? That curiosity becomes reverence. They may never fully articulate it, but in their mind, you become the standard for what emotional maturity looks like. Not a fantasy, not an obsession, something rarer, truth. You taught them, without teaching, that love doesn't have to mean surrendering the self. You showed them that real connection is not about control or dependency, but about two complete people choosing each other freely. That's your legacy in their story. You didn't just make them see your value. You made them confront their own. And though they may return or they may not, it doesn't matter. Because your worth isn't determined by whether they see it. It's reflected in the peace you carry forward. You've become unforgettable, not through scarcity, but through wholeness. The kind of wholeness that doesn't beg to be chosen, because it already knows its value. And in a world full of people trying to prove their worth, that is what makes you stand apart. So remember, your power isn't in making them remember you. It's in becoming the kind of person they can't forget. If this message resonates, share it with someone who needs it. Leave your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more reflections like this one.